Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. We're diving into some fascinating developments in Indonesia following the 2024 Pilkada elections.
Yes, quite a few, actually.
Specifically, the inauguration process for those newly elected regional heads. Seems like there's a bit of a time crunch.
Yeah.
You know, the public's eager to see their new leaders take charge, but ensuring a smooth and legal transition, well, that takes time.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Yeah.
We've got some recent news articles here detailing some recent schedule changes, and we're going to dig into why those changes are happening.
Sounds good.
So initially, the plan was to have all the inaugurations on February 6th.
That's right. Big day plan.
Yeah, huge. With President Prabowo himself officiating. I mean, that would have been quite the event.
Absolutely. Having the president there really underscores the significance of these regional elections, you know?
Definitely. But then, bam, delays.
Yeah.
So what happened? What's causing this holdup?
Well, it boils down to legal challenges. There are a number of election disputes that have popped up.
So some of the results are being contested.
Exactly. And until those disputes are resolved through the proper legal channels, the inauguration can't move forward for those specific regions. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, I can see that. So we're not just talking about, like, paperwork delays or something. These are potentially some serious legal battles that could drag on.
Precisely. And that's where the real tension lies.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you have the public who voted and are ready for those new leaders to get to work. But on the other hand, you absolutely have to ensure the integrity of the election process itself. You know, due process, fairness, all of that.
Absolutely. So what happens now? Are we just in a holding pattern waiting for the courts to make their decisions?
Well, not exactly. The Minister of Home Affairs, Tito Canavian, he proposed 3 alternative dates to the president. February 18th, 19th, and 20th.
Okay, so they're trying to buy some time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
And what did the president decide?
Well, ultimately, he chose February 20th.
Interesting. So still a Thursday, just like the original date. I guess they're trying to maintain a little bit of consistency amidst all this uncertainty.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. It's almost like a tug of war, isn't it? Between those public expectations and the need to, you know, make sure everything is legally sound. And speaking of legal, we can't forget the Constitutional Court.
Oh, right. The MK, as they call it in Indonesia.
Yeah, they play a huge role here.
They have the final say in these election disputes.
Precisely. Their decisions directly impact when and if those inaugurations can happen.
Okay, so how is the MK handling all of this?
Well, they've actually expedited the rulings on a number of the cases.
Oh, really? So they're trying to speed things up?
Yeah, it seems so. Originally, those rulings were scheduled for February 11th to the 13th, but they moved them up to February 4th and 5th.
Wow, that's quite a shift. Why the rush?
Well, I suspect they want to avoid a situation where, you know, the inauguration goes ahead and then a ruling comes out that changes things.
Oh, yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. Imagine the headlines. Newly inaugurated officials ousted by court ruling.
Exactly. Chaos. Not exactly a vote of confidence in the system.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about a small number of regions here, are we?
No, not at all. There are 296 regional heads who are ready to be inaugurated, no disputes.
Okay.
But another 249 regions are still waiting for those MK rulings.
Wow. So almost half are in limbo right now.
Yeah.
What a logistical nightmare.
It is. And remember, traditionally, the president participates in these ceremonies.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine trying to organize an event of that scale with so much uncertainty still hanging in the air?
I'm starting to get a sense of the pressure they're all under. Trying to follow the legal procedures, keep the public informed, and coordinate a major event all at the same time.
Exactly. And then there's the question of how all of this is playing out in the eyes of the public. Are they patient with the process, or are these delays fueling frustration and distrust?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost in the dates and the rulings,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's the public's perception that matters most.
Absolutely. And public perception is a complex beast,
Yeah.
especially in a situation like this where there are good reasons for the delays, but also potential for skepticism to creep in.
It really is. I mean, you've got people who voted, they're excited to see their new leaders in action.
Yeah.
And then, you know, these delays might feel like just another roadblock.
Yeah, and roadblocks can definitely lead to frustration.
Exactly. So how do we unpack this? Like, what are the things that might shape how the public is viewing these, you know, inauguration postponements?
Well, I think communication is huge.
Oh, yeah.
How well is the government explaining these delays? You know, are they being transparent about the reasons behind it?
Right. Because if people feel like they're being kept in the dark or
Mhm.
that things are just chaotic and disorganized, well, that's not going to inspire much confidence, is it?
No, not at all. Transparency is absolutely key. People need to understand that these delays aren't arbitrary. They're happening for a reason, to make sure the election results are legitimate.
Okay, so transparency is a big one. But even if the communication is good, there's still bound to be a certain level of impatience, right?
Oh, of course. That's natural.
I mean, it's like waiting for a package that keeps getting delayed. At first, you're understanding, but after a while, you start to wonder if it's ever going to show up.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And in this case, the package is, effective governance.
Right.
The longer these delays drag on, the more people might start to question if these new officials can actually deliver on their promises.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then there are also the more practical implications too, right? Like I imagine these delays could actually impact how regional governments function day to day.
Oh, absolutely.
Projects might be put on hold. Certain services could be affected.
You're exactly right. Those are very real concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer things stay unresolved, the greater the chance of disruption, even, economic consequences.
So it seems like the government is walking a very, very fine line here,
They are. It's a real balancing act.
trying to be thorough and follow the legal processes, but also, acknowledging that the public wants to see action.
Yeah. Finding that sweet spot is crucial. It's about maintaining public trust and ensuring that transition of power goes smoothly.
And it's important to remember that public perception isn't one big monolith either. Different groups of people are going to view these delays differently based on their own experiences, their political beliefs, all sorts of things.
That's a great point. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right.
Some people might see these delays and think, okay, good, the system is working. They're taking the time to make sure everything is done right.
Right.
While others might see it as a sign that the system is just bogged down by bureaucracy.
And that range of opinions is part of what makes this whole thing so interesting, right?
Absolutely.
It's like a microcosm of democracy itself.
Yeah.
You're constantly trying to balance different interests and perspectives.
You hit the nail on the head. It's a process, not an endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and a willingness to have these open and honest dialogues.
Speaking of dialogue, one thing that really jumped out at me from these articles was the focus on the Constitutional Court. They're really in the hot seat right now.
Oh, they are. The MK is under immense scrutiny.
And their decisions will definitely shape how people view not just the inauguration itself, but also the court's own legitimacy and impartiality.
That's right. People are watching very closely.
Mm-hmm.
How the MK handles these cases, it's going to have a lasting impact.
So they need to show that they're being efficient, but also meticulous,
Yeah.
making sure that justice is served, but also recognizing that there's a sense of urgency here.
It's like they're juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope.
That's a great image. But it speaks to the complexity of democracy, doesn't it?
It really does. You have these institutions in place to handle these tough challenges, to try and ensure that the process is fair and transparent.
And it's also a reminder that democracy isn't a spectator sport. We all have to participate, think critically, and be willing to have these important discussions about the issues that matter.
Absolutely. And those discussions are happening right now all across Indonesia.
Yeah.
People are talking about these delays, about the MK's role, and what it all means for their democracy.
So how do we make sure that those discussions are, productive? That they actually help make Indonesia's democracy stronger and more resilient?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's something we're going to dig into a little bit deeper in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about the legal back and forth and all the challenges surrounding the Constitutional Court's role. But at the end of the day, this all boils down to the Indonesian people.
You're absolutely right. Public trust and engagement are the cornerstones of a healthy democracy. How are the people reacting to all of this?
Well, from the articles I've seen, it seems like there's a mix of reactions, understandably so. Some people see these delays as a necessary evil, like a sign that the system is actually working, protecting the integrity of the election.
It's actually really encouraging to see that perspective, especially when you consider, Indonesia's history with electoral challenges. It suggests that people are really starting to value due process, even if it means waiting a bit longer to see their new leaders in office.
It definitely points to a more mature democracy, for sure. But let's be honest, not everyone's thrilled with these postponements.
Of course not.
There are legitimate concerns about the impact these delays are having, especially at the regional level.
Right. People are worried about projects being put on hold, services being disrupted. That sense of uncertainty can be really unsettling.
Exactly. And uncertainty can lead to frustration, even cynicism towards the government. If people start to feel like the system isn't working for them, that's a dangerous path.
Absolutely. And that's why the government's communication strategy is so important. They need to be clear and consistent in explaining not only the reasons behind the delays, but also what steps they're taking to mitigate the negative impacts and how they're working towards a resolution.
Transparency is everything. People need to feel like they're in the loop, that their concerns are being heard. It all comes down to building trust and showing accountability.
Couldn't agree more. And it goes beyond just managing expectations. It's about addressing those very real anxieties that these delays are creating. People need reassurance that their needs are still a priority.
So it's a multi-layered challenge.
It is.
The government has to navigate these legal complexities, address the public's concerns, and somehow maintain the integrity of the whole democratic process, all while ensuring that the transition of power ultimately goes smoothly.
It's a lot to juggle, that's for sure. But it's also an opportunity for Indonesia to really showcase its commitment to democracy. Their ability to adapt and overcome these unexpected hurdles.
It's a pivotal moment. Will this experience ultimately reinforce people's faith in the system, or will it create seeds of doubt?
Only time will tell. But one thing we know for certain is that the Indonesian people are resilient. They're engaged and they care deeply about their democracy. They've faced challenges before and they'll get through this one there.
Throughout our deep dive today, we've seen that open dialogue, informed debate, and a collective commitment to fairness, transparency, and accountability are absolutely essential.
They are the pillars of a healthy democracy. And as we move forward, it's up to all of us to keep those conversations going, ask the tough questions, hold our leaders accountable.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the 2024 Pilkada inauguration process. We've certainly covered a lot of ground, from the intricate legal issues to the challenges of public perception.
It has been fascinating to delve into this with you, and I hope our listeners now have a better grasp of the complexities surrounding this crucial transition of power.
And remember, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
The conversation doesn't end here. It's on all of us to stay informed and engaged in shaping a stronger and more resilient democracy for Indonesia.
Keep those questions coming, keep the discussions going, and keep diving deep into the issues that matter most.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.